So, the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority has proposed some changes to the laws that govern drones in Trinidad and Tobago. And in this video, we're going to show you what some of those changes may look like. Let's get into it. So a series of virtual consultations were held by the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority, or the TTCAA, and those sessions were used to show some of the proposed updates to the laws that govern drones or UAS in Trinidad and Tobago, and also to get feedback from stakeholders in the local drone industry. And for anybody that isn't familiar with the regulations, that regulation is TTCAR 19, which I will link in the description. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you what those proposed changes will look like. Now, before we get into that, we have a couple disclaimers. Now, the first one is that I'm going to be using the term drone, UAS, and UAV to all mean the same thing. I'm going to be using them interchangeably. So for the purposes of this video, drone, UAV, UAS, same thing. The second thing is that all of the things that I'm going to be discussing are all proposed and are not currently law. They still have to be finalized. Some of them might be changed. Some of them may not even make it into the final proposal. And then those things will have to be sent to the government before they can be made law. So until that happens, all of the existing rules still apply. Right, now that we have that out of the way, so the proposed amendments were broken down into 6 categories, and they are as follows: UAS registration, UAS operator certificate, operator licenses, organizational approval for UAS operations, approve UAS training organizations, and I'm going to put the last one as miscellaneous amendments and additions. So, section 1, UAS registration. And the first thing that they are proposing is that they redefine the UAS categories. And the example I was given is currently category 2, which are drones that are greater than 750 grams and less than 20 kilograms maximum takeoff weight and have a maximum forward velocity of less than 40 meters per second. It is proposed that category 2 be reduced from that between 750 to 20 kilograms to between 100 grams and 200 grams. And all other categories will be updated accordingly. The next proposed change is that mandatory UAS awareness sessions for all UAS owners in Trinidad and Tobago, regardless of the maximum takeoff weight or maximum speed. Currently, the awareness sessions are only necessary for drones that weigh greater than 750 grams or have a maximum speed of more than 40 meters per second. They are also proposing to expand the categories to include other areas, for example, professional and academic operations. And again, currently the categories that exist are things such as recreational, commercial, experimental, scientific. So basically, they're just going to be expanding the number of categories that you can have your drone registered under. Next up, they're looking to change it so that they will now be accepting digital copies of the certificate of your drone registration. As it is right now, you are required to keep hard copies on your person at all times. A mention was also made of redoing the certificate, probably into a different format, but not a lot of detail was given on that. And the last one for this section is the expanding of the type of liability insurance accepted. So they will still be requiring liability insurance for commercial operations, but they will take into consideration the type of insurance that is needed for the type of operation. And that would be the proposed changes that would fall under the first section, which is UAS registration. Now, moving on to the second section, we are looking at UAS operator certificate. So this section has to deal with the approval that you have to receive anytime you want to perform non-recreational flights. So here's what his proposed changes look like. First of all, they were proposing to rename the current approval process to Unmanned Aircraft Operations Permit. And they'll also provide a list of standard requirements to gain approval from the TTCAA, also retaining the right to request additional information. And this was done in an effort to minimize any sort of confusion as to what an operator will be required to submit when requesting approval for an operation. The next thing was they would like to establish a time frame for non-emergency requests. So you have to put your request in so far in advance. for non-emergencies in order to receive your approval. Next on the list on this category would be to include consideration for foreign operators and also include considerations for emergencies, search and rescue, government, law enforcement, and life-saving missions. Now, moving on to section 3, we're looking at operator license regulations. Now, this one, they're looking to establish licensing requirements for drone operators based on the category, whether it be category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the drone, and the class of the drone, whether it be a fixed wing, multi-rotor, VTOL, or etc. And this is going to be called an unmanned aircraft operator license. Now, with this license, there are going to be 2 tiers of licenses. Level 1 being the basic operations, and level 2 being the advanced or complex operations level of license. Now, with level 1, there will be some eligibility requirements like age, training, and a certain level of manufacturer specific competency. And level 2, in addition to the level 1 requirements, they may also require some sort of advanced training, flight assessments, things like character checks, medical fitness certificates, stuff like that. The licenses will be proposed to be valid for a period of 24 months with some sort of recurrent assessments required for renewal. And of course, civil aviation will also be able to suspend or cancel a license for breaches of the regulations, which is to be expected. Now we're looking at section 4, organizational approval for UAS operations. And this is basically proposed in an attempt to formalize the drone service providers in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is to have your organization approved by the TTCAA, and is different from the approvals that you'll have to get for your individual operations or commercial flights. So what this look like is that it will require companies or institutions conducting commercial, professional, academic, scientific, or experimental operations will have to seek approval from the TTCAA before they start conducting those operations. So all organizations must obtain TTCAA approval before commencing operations. Organizations applying to the TTCAA for approval must include the drones register that will be used by the organization, the licensed operators, we'll get to that in a second, ops manuals, things like outlines of the nature, the scope, the purpose, the fleet of the UAS, and the organizational structure. This approval will be valid for 24 months and will be renewable once continued compliance is met. The holders of this approval will have to ensure that the UAS registration, the licenses, any permits issued are up to date. And if there are any changes to any of those things, they would be required to notify the TTCAA within a specified time frame, and all records must be available upon request. Again, similar to the operational certificate or operational license, the TTCAA still reserves the right to suspend, revoke, or reprove or refuse this approval that they're issuing to the organizations. All right, so moving on to section 5, and we are looking at approved UAS training organization regulations. So the TTCAA is establishing the ability to grant approval for organizations to provide drone training. So basically, they're looking at issuing standardized curricula for organizations that will have qualified instructors and accredited facilities to be able to provide training to operators looking to get that sort of thing. This will be valid for 24 months and can be renewed once the requirements for the renewal are met. And similarly, TTCAA reserves the right to suspend or cancel this approval if there are violations to their regulations. Now, the last one, section 6, would be the miscellaneous amendments and additions to the regulations. Now, some of these things did not have their own category or weren't, broad enough to require their own category, so they kind of just fell into a miscellaneous section. But some of those things look like new regulations for operations in controlled airspace and updates to the documents that the TTCAA can request from you for inspection. Now, not a lot of further information was given on this, but I guess before it goes to Parliament or after it's finalized, we will learn exactly what those things are. There's a clause in the current regulation that covers loss of control, and this would now be moved under a new section called accident reporting. So that's the next proposed change. Moving on from there, we have additional inclusions that will cover things like in-flight emergency, updated operator responsibilities, new provisions for operations from moving vehicles or aircraft operations at night, and both weather conditions and day conditions. So we have quite a few things happening in that one. Another inclusion to the proposed regulations would be the addition to the regulations that would deal with the interference of the command and control and navigation systems of a drone. So that would be things to deal with if persons are involved in intentionally causing interference to the command and control link or the navigation of a drone or a UAS system. They'll be putting things in place to deal with that. And as a part of this, they'd also be looking at persons involved in the operations involving the carriage of dangerous or hazardous goods. Now, one of the last ones that I find was kind of stuck down in the end and maybe should have, get a little more notice up front was the introduction of remote identification for as standard remote ID for operations and exemptions, and rules around dropping, dispensing, or spraying operations and swarm operations. So basically here you're looking at think agricultural spraying and drone light show operations. So that is something they're looking to improve, and I know that is something that persons have been asking for in the industry locally for a very, very, very long time. And lastly, but certainly not least, the expansion of offenses and penalties and revised exemption provisions. Because at the end of the day, I guess they can't really be implementing all the things that the local industry has been asking for, but leave the penalties the same if you still decide not to follow the rules. Because at the end of the day, the majority of these things that have been put forward in this legislation are things that the local community have been looking at and asking for quite some time. So if you still choose to not follow those rules, then the penalty should be increased for persons who, go in straight from that. So what we just covered there were the proposed updates and additions to the regulations that govern the use of drones in Trinidad and Tobago. What do you think about it? Let's discuss on the comments. And until the next time, take care.